The cold, metallic click echoed in the small, windowless room, a sound utterly alien to the cheerful sunshine just beyond the community clubhouse walls. Dust motes danced in the single sliver of light escaping from beneath the ill-fitting door, the only illumination in the oppressive dimness. A child's whimper, soft and terrified, cut through the silence, followed by a tiny fist beating a desperate, muffled rhythm against the unyielding wood. Trapped. Alone. This wasn't a game, not some childish escapade of hide-and-seek gone awry. This was calculated cold and utterly horrifying. My breath caught in my throat, the casual summer attire I wore, suddenly feeling inadequate, a flimsy disguise for the federal investigator simmering just beneath the surface. The questions stark and ugly burned in my mind. Who could do this? And why was this child, no older than 7, imprisoned here? My name is Sarah Miller, and until 3 weeks ago, Willow Creek Estates had represented a quiet promise, a leafy suburban haven where I could shed the skin of Special Agent Miller's Civil Rights Division Department of Justice and just be Sarah, the woman who liked to read on her porch and attempt to nurture a temperamental rosebush. I'd bought the little bungalow on Sycamore Lane seeking anonymity, a respite from the relentless ugliness I often confronted in my professional life. The neighborhood was idyllic, almost aggressively so, with its perfectly manicured lawns, matching mailboxes, and the omnipresent, slightly Stepford-esque cheerfulness of its residents. The Homeowners Association, presided over by a woman whose smile never quite reached her eyes. One Karen Albright seemed to be the invisible hand guiding this relentless perfection. Flyers detailing acceptable lawn gnome heights and the precise shade of beige for exterior paint were common, but I dismissed it as harmless suburban eccentricity. My focus was on settling in, finding the best local coffee, and forgetting for a while the weight of my badge and the responsibilities it entailed. I'd seen the boy Leo a few times around the community pool with his mother Alicia. He was a bright spark, his laughter infectious, his dark eyes alight with curiosity, despite the slight awkwardness in his gait, caused by a leg brace he wore with uncomplaining resilience. Alicia was a gentle woman, her devotion to Leo evident in every interaction. They were new to the community too, and I'd exchanged pleasantries with Alicia, sensing a kindred spirit in her quiet warmth. They seemed to be finding their footing, just as I was. The pool was a shared joy, the cool water, a balm against the humid summer afternoons. Leo, with careful encouragement from Alicia, would paddle in the shallow end, his face a mask of concentration and delight. These were the ordinary moments, the fabric of the life I was trying to weave for myself here. The first tear in that fabric appeared on a Tuesday. I was tending to my still sulking roses when I heard raised voices from the direction of the community clubhouse. Karen Albright stood hands on hips, addressing Alicia, who held Leo's hand tightly. Leo looked small and scared, his usual ebullience extinguished. "This is a community facility, Mrs. Henderson." Karen's voice was sharp, carrying clearly in the still air. "It is not a place for unsupervised loitering or the destruction of property." Alicia's response was quiet but firm. "Leo was just picking a flower, Ms. Albright. He meant no harm. He loves the daisies that grow near the path, daisies which are part of the HOA's landscaping budget." Karen retorted, her gaze flicking dismissively towards Leo. "There are rules, Mrs. Henderson, rules that apply to everyone. Unattended children are a liability, and frankly, the way he stomps around, it's not good for the sod." My blood ran a little colder. The casual cruelty, the barely veiled ableism in her tone was unmistakable. Leo's leg brace was not a choice, her disdain for it was. Alicia pulled Leo closer. "He is always supervised by me, and he was not harming anything. He's a child who needs to learn boundaries," Karen said, her voice hardening. "Consider this a formal warning. Further infractions will result in a review of your access to community amenities." She turned on her heel and marched back towards the clubhouse, a self-appointed queen surveying her domain. Alicia stood there for a moment, her shoulders slumped, before kneeling to comfort Leo, who was now openly crying. I watched them walk away, a knot tightening in my stomach. This wasn't just about flowers or sod. This was about power and a particular kind of prejudice I recognized all too well. My quiet life was already developing shadows. The following weeks saw a subtle but insidious escalation. New notices appeared on the community bulletin board, drafted with meticulous passive-aggressive precision. To ensure the safety and enjoyment of all residents, children requiring special assistance or supervision must be accompanied by a dedicated adult caregiver at all times within common areas. Another read, repeated damage to landscaping or community property, however minor, will result in immediate suspension of privileges and potential fines levied against the responsible household. The rules were ostensibly for everyone, but the timing and the undercurrent were clearly directed at Alicia and Leo. I saw Alicia at the community mailboxes a few days later, her face etched with worry. "It's getting difficult, Sarah," she confided, her voice low. "It feels like we're being watched, singled out." "Have you spoken to anyone else on the board?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral, that of a concerned neighbor. Alicia sighed. "They mostly defer to Karen. She's been president for years. No one wants to cross her." The atmosphere around the pool changed. Where Leo once paddled with relative freedom under Alicia's watchful eye, now Karen, or one of her loyal acolytes, always seemed to be nearby, their scrutiny a palpable weight. Other children, sensing the tension, began to shy away from Leo. His laughter became less frequent, his bright spark dimming. It was bullying by bureaucracy, a slow, suffocating squeeze. I started documenting everything, old habits dying hard. Dates, times, verbatim quotes from the notices, the subtle shifts in community behavior. My investigator instincts, suppressed for weeks, were now fully awake and screaming. The tipping point, the act that shattered any pretense of Willow Creek's serenity, came on a sweltering Thursday afternoon. I was returning from an errand, the heat making the air shimmer above the asphalt. As I neared the clubhouse, I saw Alicia, her face a mask of raw panic, her voice shrill with terror. "Leo, Leo, where are you, Leo?" She was running frantically around the clubhouse grounds, peering behind bushes, her calls growing more desperate. My heart leaped into my throat. "Alicia, what's wrong?" "He was just here." She gasped, tears streaming down her face. "Playing by the old storage shed behind the clubhouse." I turned my back for a minute, just a minute to answer a call, and he was gone. "He wouldn't wander off, Sarah, he knows not." To Karen Albright emerged from the clubhouse an expression of pursed annoyance on her face. "Mrs. Henderson, must you cause such a commotion? There are residents trying to enjoy a peaceful afternoon. My son is missing, Ms. Albright." Alicia cried, her voice breaking. "Leo is gone." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Missing. Or perhaps he's finally decided to explore where he shouldn't. I've warned you about his tendency to trespass." "He wouldn't," Alicia insisted, her anguish painful to witness. A cold dread washed over me. The storage shed. Karen's earlier complaints about trespassing, her escalating hostility. I looked at the shed, then at the main clubhouse building, a small, rarely used office at its rear near the service entrance. Something clicked. "Alicia, did you check the back office? The one near the utility meters?" Alicia looked confused. "No, why would he be in there?" Karen scoffed. "Of course he's not in there. It's kept locked." But her eyes flickered just for a fraction of a second, a micro-expression of something other than annoyance. Guilt, apprehension. "Let's check anyway," I said, my voice firm, already moving towards the back of the clubhouse. Alicia followed Hope, warring with fear on her face. Karen trailed behind us, protesting. "This is unnecessary. You're alarming the residents." The door to the back office was indeed closed. I tried the handle. Locked. "See," Karen said, a note of triumph in her voice. "Locked, as it should be." But then I heard it, faint, almost imperceptible, but undeniably there. A child's whimper, and then a soft, rhythmic thudding. Alicia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Leo," she called, her voice trembling. The whimpering intensified, and the thudding became more frantic. "Mommy," a tiny, terrified voice cried from within. "Leo, oh my baby." Alicia lunged for the door, rattling the handle uselessly. I turned to Karen Albright, my carefully constructed neighborly facade dissolving completely. "Ms. Albright," I said, my voice dangerously quiet, "open this door. Now." Karen actually paled, but her arrogance was a deeply ingrained reflex. "I will not." That child was trespassing on HOA property, creating a nuisance. I secured him until the authorities could be called to deal with the situation appropriately. He needs to learn that actions have consequences. You locked a disabled child in a windowless room. My voice was still low, but it vibrated with a fury I rarely let surface. On what authority, Ms. Albright? On the authority of the HOA bylaws, she snapped, regaining some of her composure, and as a concerned citizen protecting community property. Open the door. Karen Alicia pleaded, tears coursing down her cheeks. Please, he's terrified. Karen folded her arms. The property manager has the only key. He's been called. He'll be here shortly. And then we will discuss Leo's repeated violations. That was when the sliver of light beneath the door became my focus. The thin, desperate hope in Leo's muffled cries. The sheer, unadulterated cruelty of the woman standing before me. My quiet life in Willow Creek Estates was officially over. I met Karen Albright's defiant gaze. Ms. Albright, I stated each word precise and cold as ice I am. Special Agent Sarah Miller, with the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. You are currently illegally detaining a minor child, and you are obstructing a federal investigation that, as of this moment, has just begun. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you exercise it. Now give me the key, or I will be forced to make entry. The change in Karen Albright was instantaneous and profound. The color drained from her face, leaving it a pasty, mottled gray. Her jaw, moments before, set in stubborn defiance, went slack. Her eyes, which had flashed with self-righteous anger, now darted around wildly like a trapped animal, seeking an escape route that no longer existed. The HOA bylaws, her perceived authority, the carefully constructed walls of her petty kingdom, all crumbled to dust in the face of those few calm words. Federal Investigator. She stammered the words, barely a whisper. The smugness, the entitlement, the sheer audacity that had defined her all vanished, replaced by a dawning, sickening terror. The key, Ms. Albright, I repeated, my voice unyielding. My hand instinctively went to my hip, where my service weapon would normally be a phantom pressure that spoke of years of training. Today, however, my authority came not from a firearm, but from the full weight of federal law. Her hand, trembling, violently fumbled in the pocket of her linen slacks. It emerged, clutching a small, tarnished brass key. Not the property manager's key. Her key. She had lied. Of course she had. I snatched the key from her grasp. My own hands were steady as I inserted it into the lock. The mechanism turned with a protesting groan, and I pushed the door inward. The sight that greeted me sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins. Leo was huddled in the far corner of the small, cluttered office, which was indeed windowless and stiflingly hot. Dust lay thick on old filing cabinets and stacks of forgotten HOA documents. He was crying silently, his small body racked with shivers. Despite the heat, his face streaked with dirt and tears. The moment he saw Alicia, a choked sob escaped him. Mommy Alicia rushed to him, gathering him into her arms, murmuring words of comfort, her own tears mingling with his. It's okay, baby, Mommy's here. You're safe now. You're safe. I stepped aside, allowing them their moment, my gaze fixed on Karen Albright. She stood frozen, her eyes wide, with a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror at the reality of her actions, now stripped bare of her self-serving justifications. The air crackled with unspoken accusations, with the raw pain of a mother and the silent terror of a child. He was pulling wires out of the air conditioning unit. Karen mumbled a pathetic attempt at defense. He could have been hurt. I was protecting him. And the property. I glanced at the ancient, clearly defunct air conditioning unit in the corner. No wires were visibly pulled. It was another lie, a desperate, grasping invention. Ms. Albright, I said, stepping fully into the dim room, my shadow falling over her. You are going to come with me to the clubhouse common room. You will sit. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not contact anyone. Is that understood? She nodded numbly, her previous arrogance utterly deflated. The fight had gone out of her, replaced by the cold, clammy grip of fear. I escorted her out of the small office, leaving Alicia to continue comforting Leo. The sunshine outside felt almost blinding after the oppressive gloom of Leo's makeshift prison. The contrast was a stark metaphor for the darkness Karen Albright had brought into this supposedly bright community. As I led Karen towards the main clubhouse area, I used my personal cell phone, the one I kept for off-duty life, now pressed into official service. My first call was to the local police department requesting immediate uniformed assistance for a child endangerment and unlawful imprisonment situation, and to inform them that a federal agent was on scene. My second call was to my supervisor at the DOJ, a brief, concise report outlining the critical facts. The wheels of federal justice, once set in motion, moved with formidable speed. Agent Miller on site, I said into the phone, my voice betraying none of the turmoil I felt. Unlawful imprisonment of a minor potential hate crime implications based on disability and race. Requesting immediate local PD backup and initiation of a full field investigation. The subject's name is Karen Albright, HOA, president of Willow Creek Estates. The line was quiet for a moment, then my supervisor's voice, normally calm, held a new edge. Understood, Miller. Local PD is being patched through now. Document everything. We'll have a team en route within hours. When I ended the call, Karen Albright was staring at me, her expression a cocktail of terror and utter incomprehension. It was clear she had never imagined her actions could have consequences of this magnitude. In her small world, she was the law. That illusion had just been irrevocably shattered. We sat in the clubhouse common room, the air thick with an unvoiced tension that was far more oppressive than the summer heat. Alicia had brought Leo out, holding him close on one of the floral-patterned sofas. He was quiet now, his small face buried in his mother's shoulder, but the occasional tremor that ran through his body spoke volumes. I made a few gentle attempts to speak with him to gather his account, but Alicia shook her head slightly. Later, Sarah. Please, he's been through enough. I respected that. His well-being was paramount. I focused instead on observing Karen. She sat ramrod straight on a wicker chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her gaze fixed on a point somewhere beyond, the manicured lawns, visible through the large picture window. The queen was dethroned, her castle walls breached, and the fear was palpable. The arrival of the local police, 2 uniformed officers, was swift. I identified myself, presented my credentials, and briefly outlined the situation. Their expressions, initially skeptical when faced with a distraught mother and a defensive HOA president, shifted to professional gravity as they absorbed the facts and my federal standing. Officer Ramirez, the senior of the 2, addressed Karen. Ma'am, we need to ask you some questions about what happened here today. Karen opened her mouth, perhaps to offer another of her twisted justifications, but then she caught my eye. I gave a subtle, almost imperceptible shake of my head. She remembered my instruction to remain silent. She closed her mouth, a flicker of something, resentment, fear, in her eyes. While Officer Ramirez and his partner began their preliminary questioning of Karen, taking her to a more private area of the clubhouse, I spoke quietly with Alicia. Alicia, I know this is incredibly difficult, but when you feel up to it, I'll need a formal statement from you and from Leo, if he's able. Alicia nodded, her eyes, still red-rimmed, but now holding a new resolve. We will, Sarah. We will. What she did, it was monstrous. He's just a child. My child. Her voice trembled with a mother's protective fury. She hated him from the moment we moved in. Because he's black. Because of his brace. I don't know. Maybe both. We're going to find out, I assured her, and we're going to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. The next few hours were a blur of activity. My DOJ colleagues, a rapid response team specializing in civil rights violations, arrived. They were professionals, efficient and empathetic. The clubhouse transformed into a temporary command center. Statements were taken, photographs of the small office were meticulously captured, measurements were made. The community, initially drawn by the commotion and the sight of police cars, began to buzz with rumors and hushed speculation. Word of Karen Albright's actions and her subsequent detention for questioning spread like wildfire through Willow Creek Estates. Faces I'd seen smiling benignly at HOA meetings now wore expressions of shock, disbelief, and in some cases a dawning understanding. It seemed Karen's reign had been characterized by more than just strict adherence to aesthetic codes. Other stories began to surface, quiet murmurings at first, then growing bolder as residents realized the power dynamic had shifted. Tales of arbitrary fines, of veiled threats against those who dared to question her authority, of a consistent pattern of targeting anyone perceived as different or non-compliant. A young couple, the Patels, approached me, their faces pale. Agent Miller, Mr. Patel, began his voice, hesitant. Miss Albright. She made things very difficult for us when we wanted to install a small ramp for my mother's wheelchair. She said it wasn't in keeping with the community aesthetic. An elderly gentleman, Mr. Henderson, no relation to Alicia, ironically spoke of being fined repeatedly for his slightly overgrown vegetable garden, a source of pride and sustenance for him because Karen deemed it unsightly. The tapestry of Karen Albright's petty tyranny was being unraveled thread by thread, revealing an ugly pattern of abuse, of power, discrimination, and intimidation, all hidden beneath the veneer of suburban order. Leo's imprisonment was not an isolated incident. It was the horrific culmination of that pattern. The midpoint twist wasn't just my revealing my identity, it was the realization that Karen's malice wasn't a singular event, but a systemic rot she had cultivated. And with her power suddenly neutralized by federal intervention, the dam of silence within the community broke. The secret was out. Willow Creek wasn't idyllic. It was a community held hostage by one woman's prejudice, and many had been too cowed or too comfortable to challenge her. This revelation changed everything, not just for Karen, but for everyone in Willow Creek. It was no longer just about Leo. It was about reclaiming their community. The climax arrived not in a courtroom, not yet, but in the heart of the community. Karen Albright had sought to dominate an emergency HOA meeting convened 2 evenings later. The clubhouse common room, usually host to bland discussions about landscaping and holiday decorations, was packed to capacity. The air was thick with anticipation, anger, and a nervous energy. Alicia sat in the front row, Leo beside her holding her hand tightly. He was subdued, but his eyes, when they met mine, held a flicker of resilience. I was there along with 2 of my DOJ colleagues, as observers, a silent but potent federal presence. The remaining HOA board members, looking distinctly uncomfortable, sat at a table at the front. Karen Albright was conspicuously absent. She was out on bail, her movements restricted her reputation in tatters, but the terms of her release did not prevent her presence. Her lawyer, however, had strongly advised against it. Her empty chair was a statement in itself. The acting president, a nervous man named Arthur Jenkins, cleared his throat. "We are here tonight," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "to discuss the recent events involving Miss Albright and the Henderson family, and to determine the future leadership of this association." Alicia was the first to speak. She stood, her voice clear and strong, resonating through the hushed room. She didn't recount the horror of the imprisonment in graphic detail. She didn't need to. Instead, she spoke of Leo's joy, his love for their new home, and how that joy had been systematically eroded by Karen's targeted harassment. "My son," she said, her gaze sweeping across the assembled faces, "is a child who loves to laugh, to play, to explore. He has a disability, yes, but that does not define him. It certainly does not make him a threat or a nuisance or deserving of being locked in a dark room, terrified and alone." Her voice cracked with emotion, but she pressed on. What happened to Leo was not just about a broken rule or damaged property. It was about hate. It was about intolerance. And it happened because one person was allowed to wield too much power unchecked for too long, and because perhaps too many of us were silent. A wave of murmurs swept through the room. Shame, anger, agreement. Then Mr. Patel stood. "She's right. Ms. Albright denied our request for a simple wheelchair ramp for my elderly mother, citing aesthetics. My mother became a prisoner in our own home because of it. Mrs. Rodriguez, a single mother, spoke next. I was fined $300 because my son's bicycle was left on our lawn for 2 hours. Karen said it lowered property values. I work 2 jobs. Sometimes things get overlooked." One by one, residents stood, their voices gaining strength, sharing their own stories of Karen Albright's overreach, her discriminatory practices, her vindictive enforcement of petty rules. It was a catharsis, a collective unburdening of years of suppressed frustration and fear. The dam hadn't just broken. It had burst, unleashing a torrent of grievances. My DOJ colleagues and I listened, taking notes. This testimony, this outpouring, was crucial. It painted a picture of a community not just failed by its leadership, but actively harmed by it. Finally, Arthur Jenkins, looking overwhelmed but also strangely liberated, addressed the room. "It is clear," he said, his voice firmer, "now that Ms. Albright can no longer serve as president or as a member of this board. I propose an immediate vote for her removal." The vote was unanimous. A collective sigh of relief seemed to pass through the room. Furthermore, Jenkins continued this board proposes a complete review and overhaul of all HOA bylaws, with input from the entire community to ensure fairness, inclusivity, and transparency. We also propose establishing an independent oversight committee. The climax was not a single explosive confrontation, but the powerful unified voice of a community reclaiming its soul. It was the quiet, determined dismantling of a petty dictatorship spurred by one horrific act, but fueled by a multitude of smaller injustices. As I watched Alicia embrace a tearful Mrs. Patel and saw Mr. Henderson shake Arthur Jenkins' hand with a newfound respect, I knew this was more than just an HOA meeting. It was a community healing and a community finally truly coming together. The falling action was swift and decisive. The federal investigation proceeded with undeniable momentum. Armed with the testimonies from the community meeting and the evidence gathered on the day of Leo's imprisonment, the case against Karen Albright was formidable. She was formally indicted on multiple federal charges, including deprivation of rights under color of law and state charges for unlawful imprisonment and child endangerment. The news cameras that had initially swarmed Willow Creek for the salacious details of a Karen gone wrong story soon found themselves covering a much larger narrative, a community fighting back against discrimination, and a federal government determined to uphold civil rights. Karen Albright's assets, particularly those tied to her long tenure as HOA president, came under scrutiny. Forensic accountants from the DOJ uncovered a pattern of mismanaged funds, preferential contracts awarded to friends, and the use of HOA resources for personal vendettas, such as excessive legal fees pursuing minor infractions against residents she disliked. The courts moved to freeze assets suspected of being improperly acquired or used in the commission of her offenses. The once untouchable Queen of Willow Creek was facing not just prison time, but financial ruin. The community itself underwent a profound transformation. The HOA board, now populated with new, diverse members, including Alicia Henderson, worked diligently with legal consultants and community input to redraft the bylaws. The focus shifted from punitive enforcement of aesthetic minutiae to fostering a genuine sense of community inclusivity and mutual respect. The discriminatory rules that had targeted Leo were struck down, replaced with policies that celebrated diversity and ensured accessibility for all residents. The ramp for Mr. Patel's mother was approved and installed within a week. Mr. Henderson's vegetable garden was not only permitted, but became the site of a new community gardening initiative. My role, while still officially that of lead investigator, also evolved. Seeing the positive changes taking root in Willow Creek and recognizing the national implications of Karen's actions, my team and I began working with civil rights organizations and housing advocacy groups. Leo's case became a touchstone, a stark example of how unchecked power within HOAs could lead to egregious violations of human rights. We helped draft model legislation aimed at strengthening oversight of HOAs, ensuring due process for residents, and providing clearer avenues for recourse against discriminatory practices. The Willow Creek Accords, as they informally came to be known in policy circles, began to gain traction at state and federal levels, proposing mandatory training for HOA board members on civil rights and anti-discrimination law, and establishing clearer penalties for abuses of power. The resolution arrived on a crisp autumn day, nearly 6 months after Leo's ordeal. Karen Albright, facing overwhelming evidence and the prospect of a lengthy, damaging trial, accepted a plea bargain. She pleaded guilty to federal charges of conspiracy to interfere with civil rights and a lesser state charge of reckless endangerment. She was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison, followed by a lengthy period of supervised release. She was also ordered to pay substantial restitution to Leo's family and was permanently barred from ever holding a position of authority in any community association or similar organization. The court also approved the forfeiture of a significant portion of her assets, which were directed into a fund to support victims of housing discrimination. Justice, though slow, had been served. Willow Creek Estates celebrated not with boisterous triumph, but with a quiet, deeply felt sense of peace and renewed purpose. They held a community picnic in the park near the clubhouse, the very place where Leo had once been targeted. This time, the atmosphere was entirely different. Children of all backgrounds played freely, their laughter echoing through the trees. Leo, his leg brace still present but his spirit visibly lighter, was in the thick of it, kicking a soccer ball with a group of new friends. Alicia watched him, her face serene, a soft smile playing on her lips. She was no longer just a resident. She was a leader, a respected voice on the new HOA board, helping to shape a community where her son and all children could truly belong. I attended the picnic, not as Special Agent Miller, but as Sarah, their neighbor. The journey had been arduous, the ugliness I'd witnessed a stark reminder of the shadows that can lurk even in the most sun-dappled settings. But the outcome, the resilience of Alicia and Leo, the awakening of a community, and the potential for lasting nationwide change, left a profound and positive imprint. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow over the gathering, Arthur Jenkins, now the permanent HOA president, tapped a spoon against a glass. Friends, neighbors. He said, his voice filled with emotion. Today we celebrate not just a new season, but a new beginning for Willow Creek. A beginning forged in adversity, but strengthened by unity, courage, and a commitment to ensuring that what happened here will never happen again. To Leo for his bravery, to Alicia for her strength, and to Sarah for her unwavering dedication to justice. A cheer went up. Alicia squeezed my hand, her eyes shining. Leo ran over and gave me a spontaneous hug, his small arms surprisingly strong. In that moment, surrounded by the genuine warmth and gratitude of this reborn community, the weight of my professional responsibilities felt a little lighter, balanced by the tangible good that had emerged from such darkness. Willow Creek Estates was no longer a symbol of idyllic pretense, but a testament to the enduring power of human decency and the relentless pursuit of justice. The echoes of that cold metallic click in a dark room had finally been silenced, replaced by the vibrant sounds of a community that had found its voice and its heart. The fight for civil rights was ongoing, a marathon, not a sprint, but victories like this in small towns and sprawling cities alike were the milestones that fueled the journey forward, leaving a legacy of hope and a powerful reminder that even one voice, one courageous stand could indeed change the world, or at least a small, significant corner of it.